People who have had sex with someone with a disability of some sorts. What was different about that experience? I had a guy with type 1 diabetes once. His blood sugar dropped super low during the act and he was feeling it. His monitor alarms were going off and everything. We had to stop and go out to eat right away. At least take me to dinner first. His deviated septum meant I had to keep switching sides to avoid the nose whistle. Doot doot. I had an ex who had his leg amputated above the knee. More room to reach my clit during sex for org SMS. Otherwise pretty much the same. He's gonna hate me for posting this. But my so is a below the knee amputee. Missionary is tilted slightly to the left. Fits anywhere but a bed he has to keep his leg on. But damn he's so SI with his prosthetic on and nothing else. Edit. I love you guys. Yes, I showed him this and he was slightly embarrassed but he's glad that people think that's hot and more importantly that I do. My BF has muscle weakness issues. Just means some positions don't work out for him. And he can't pick me up usually. Not a huge deal though. Edit. Also we'll be going at it and he'll suddenly seize up and fall over in pain for a minute while his muscles cramp up. It always makes me a little concerned when he just stops and flops over. He also has Tourette's. And one time let out a loud screech in the middle of getting busy. Had a good laugh over it. Killed the mood though. Comma be me. Comma pull hot normie. Comma get SX. Comma re halfway through. I'm a disabled guy and I've never had any complaints when it comes to performance. The tricky part is sustaining a relationship while accounting for additional needs. Long term it can get stressful and cause the relationship to break down. Ex-boyfriend of mine had a seizure as a baby and lost all use of his left arm. And it atrophied. Didn't bother me at all. Definitely didn't affect his performance either. Though I don't remember ever have SX missionary. He also worked as a landscaper. And did more with one arm than I do with both of mine. Good person. But had anger issues. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder. My joints are very unstable and tend to dislocate and subluxate easily. The last few times I have had SX on top my hip has come out of socket. I had to stop riding cowgirl for this reason. I've also nearly blacked out due to a related autonomic dysfunction disorder. Lived below a deaf couple. Neither one of them realized it. But during SX they sounded like two Wookiee fighting to the death. Guy across the hall from me in college had no reservations with regard to partners. Brought back a deaf girl with zero volume control. Zero self-editing of the blow by blow, that muffled things. And poor articulation. Half the floor broke into applause. She had no idea. Edit. Thanks a bunch for the silver and gold. Slept with a deaf girl. We met at a bar and hit it off. Had a few drinks and danced a little. She had the type of slurred speech that deaf people usually have. But it didn't necessarily bother me because she was a good communicator. When we hit the bed that night at her place, I kept hearing her hearing this high-pitched feedback in my ear and it freaked me out because I didn't know why I was hearing that noise. Turns out it was a hearing aid whistling and I heard it every time our heads were right next to each other. Girl was a total sweetheart. My so has PTSD pretty bad. Some things can really trigger her. Certain sensations especially. So I have to shave, and if we're doing more serious things it's good to have lights on so she has a sense of space. Sometimes I have to stop and comfort her until she stops dissociating. But I don't mind. Over time I've learned what triggers it so it doesn't happen much anymore. I don't know if this counts, but I dated a girl older than me who had some sickness that made her bones brittle. Also she had some minor autism. When it came to SX you had to be very gentle to not break her. Was an interesting experience when you were a young eager man. XGF has severe narcolepsy. For once. I wasn't the reason a woman fell asleep during SX. Also after we broke up I got to make jokes about how for the past year I only slept with women who were passed out from GHB. Spoiler. It's a narcolepsy treatment that she had to take every night. No. It didn't do stuff to her while she was KO'd, except for roll her over so she didn't suffocate. I have partial paralysis in my legs after an injury. I can't think my way into being turned on. I need to be touched because it's all physical. Hasn't been problem with both the men and women I've been with. Meals on wheels. My first serious relationship was with a girl who was a type 1 diabetic for about a year. Whenever we had sex I had to be careful not to hit her insulin sites, which was sometimes difficult because they moved around her body and she liked it very rough. Before sex she would just tell me something like, my site is on my ass so try not to hit it. And I'd stay clear of it. During my first few times having sex outside of that relationship I would sometimes think I wonder where her site is so I can avoid it before slapping myself for being stupid. She was blind. A lot more OS and oops s. Also, I'm blind. Now with someone sighted. And from what I'm told the only difference is I'm a lot more interested in feeling rather than seeing. And a lot more attentive as to what gets the good reactions out of her. Had a fling with a girl in college with no arm below the left elbow. She was hot and awesome. The one thing she did bring to the table was she would nub my taint during handjobs blowjobs. It was as hot and awesome as you think. Nub my taint. I've had sex with a girl that had minor multiple sclerosis. It meant that occasionally she'd lose control of her legs. Absolutely wild. She'd be on top. Then suddenly fall flat on her face. Took all my strength not to crack up. Any position basically. Think about the female losing control of her legs suddenly. Probably the most interesting sex I've had to date. Like having sex with a jack in a box. I'm disabled and have fainted during sex due to a heart condition. Damn. I dated a deaf guy. I learned sign language. We broke up in the middle of our first fight. Just was so frustrating communicating with him because I was mediocre at sign language and also because both of us were not great at communicating our feelings and ideas. The middle finger's pretty universal. I had a brief relationship with a dwarf. I expected the sex to be awkward because I'm 6 feet 2, but it was actually very natural because her torso was typically sized and everything lined up like it should. Something that was different was that I could easily lift her for an extended time so we could do some stuff I can't really pull off with full-sized girls. It was a lot of fun. This thread has been everything I wanted and more. Amputees. Dwarfs. It's got everything. A girl I dated has a brachial plexus injury from birth, nerve damage that rendered her right arm mostly paralyzed. The SX was 10/10 girl was a freak. The only thing was that every once in a while her right arm would stiffen up and stick straight out in front of her and I would have to awkwardly move it out of the way while not trying to break the mood. Edited. Once in a while. Was very late after a 16-hour work day when I posted. So. You were not the only one with a stiffy? Edit. Well then. This blew up. Thanks for gold. Stranger. So like. A Nazi salute. I had a girl with a speech impediment. She couldn't pronounce her R's among some other abnormalities. When she started talking dirty it took all I had to not laugh. Oh why cat oh why wetted. I'm a quadriplegic and I just happen to masturbate quite often, so I like to think that gives me both perspectives. Due to limited feeling in my lower 2/3 it's almost like I'm giving another dude a hand job when I jerk off. But then again my hands also have limited feeling, so it also feels like someone else is jerking me off. Weird way to describe it, but there ya go. Try wrapping your mind around that. She was an anorexic. She exercised like crazy to work off calories. So she was strong and enjoyed marathon sessions, as she assumed it was good calorie burning. She was awesome in so many ways. She was extremely intelligent, creative, and fun. However, when it came to food, shopping, etc., it was like a switch was turned and she was irrational, paranoid, and just straight up terrified. In that state, she could lash out in some pretty cutting and cruel ways. That was our break in the end. But I loved her nonetheless. Hope she's doing better wherever she is now. My friend of years was extremely autistic and wasn't ever interested in romance in the least. But one day out of the blue he asked me if I could have sex with him to show him what it was like and to see if he would even enjoy it. Honestly did it half out of curiosity myself. But I think I messed up somehow. Now he's like a sex crazed fiend who messages all our friends for nudes and sex. It's been 6 years but I still feel bad. This thread makes me feel like I'm at a bar, listening to the best stories ever told. Don't know if this counts since it's me, but I'm on the autism spectrum, Asperger's, with a few other issues as well, and the medications I take completely kill my sex drive. I didn't think it would affect me as much as it has. My boyfriend insists that it's okay that we hardly ever have sex. Before it was just that I wasn't in the mood ever. But if we tried I could get into it. Now it's like I can't feel anything. Not like I'm numb, but like I just don't feel aroused at all during anything. It's really upsetting if I'm being honest. But if I don't take my meds I'm a total mess. It really sucks, pun intended, since giving blowjobs is all I'm good for in the bedroom now. Wife had a stroke a couple years ago. She has a good bit of lingering disability from it. I'll not go into what all there is. She decided about a year or so after the event that she wanted to try sex. I think more for me than her. I argued with her about it and really wasn't into it to begin with. But I did eventually make the attempt. And I fully wish I hadn't. It just felt wrong. She felt wrong. I didn't finish and she never even started. We have not discussed sex since then. We both just know it's not in the cards for us anymore. And for context, I'm 41 and she is 44. Edit, wow, this really took off, lol. Thank you to all the well wishes and for all the suggestions, good and bad. Reading the comments both made me laugh, hair up, and think. So all in all a really good thread, people. Thanks also for the gold and silver. I've never had either before. That is heartbreaking, my man. I really hope both of you can find some type of compromise. Due to their blindness, they could not see how ugly I am. They let me have the sex with them. Blind chick here. I'm positive you have your own brand of beauty handsomeness. Close bracket. I know this thread is about sex with someone with a disability. But even when looking for one night stands, blind people see your heart. I used to hook up with this girl who was born without ovaries, so I never had to worry about pulling out or wearing a condom. She's now a mother of 3 and has 3 different baby daddies. Turns out she did have her ovaries after all. Dodge a bullet there. One night stand with a friend of a friend. She's had a permanent limp her whole life. Didn't notice much difference really. I was a little warier of moving her around in case she was in an uncomfortable position, but we worked it out pretty quickly. Good times. Have this strong urge to comment, doesn't matter, had sex on all these comments. I dated a woman who had autism and multiple personality disorder and a few other things. Sex was crazy. Found out a year after we broke up that she made all her disability claims up. So I only really had sex with a liar who is capable of fooling horny young guys. I had sex with a deaf prostitute in a foreign country when I was 15. A few takeaways from it are: I asked her if she wanted me to turn music on. I'm pretty sure she thought I was the handicapped one at this point. During sex, I guess she couldn't hear herself, so she would make the most atrocious noises. A lot of snorting and deaf people sounds. Kinda sounded like I was eyeing a group of feeding pigs. Closest I've got is playing Kator Shoujo. First girlfriend had Tourette's. Not the cursing kind but the twitching kind. I dated a girl who was born with cloaca, at birth the vagina, urethra and anus all fused into one hole. When the doctors created her vagina and anus, they used some very sensitive tissue and she could climax every possible S-all way like 20 times a night. Additional, she was a very horny person. Although some complications in her daily life. Her perseverance to not let her disability get in the way of her life astonished me. Oh man, I'm late to the party, but this is one of my favorite NSFW stories about my own life, so I have to share. While I was at university, for a few months I dated a girl with a number of health issues. She'd been born really underweight, suffered from bad joints, fibromyalgia, an inverted uterus and a host of other issues. Sex was kinda complicated, but she was fun and attractive and we made it work. She also lost her right eye due to an infection when she was a child, leaving her partially sighted with a glass eye. Once, while we were getting into it doggy style, on one particularly vigorous thrust from me, said glass eye flew out of her eye, hitting the headboard with an audible ting. I stopped, uncertain of what had happened, only for her to turn around with one eye missing and burst out laughing when I fell back in surprise. She was pretty cool. We're still friends. To this date she says that's never happened with anyone else. A friend of mine was with a girl with only one leg. He said she was totally normal but couldn't be on top because of balance. He later scooted his bed up against the wall. Dated someone on the autism spectrum. Sex was awkward and uncomfortable. Besides struggling with the mechanics, he was extremely sensitive to touch, so like if I touched his chest, he'd burst into giggles. That got old really fast, along with a handful of other quirks I won't get into. Naturally, I stopped being interested. I'd say by the end of our relationship, we'd attempt sex maybe twice a month. I say attempt because neither one of us finished. Ever. In high school, a buddy of mine got a blowjob from a girl we all suspected was mildly mentally challenged. He said she just sat there on her knees with her mouth open. No motion. No suction. No licking. Just mouth open like a doctor was checking her tonsils. He just ended up jerking off into her mouth. But she swallowed, so she got bonus points. When you get all questions on the quiz wrong but ace the bonus. Girl I saw for a while was in a wheelchair. She got off when I hit her with a bamboo cane. I hit her with it in the face once. She didn't like it. She'd usually blow me afterwards. One time, she met my dad, and he said something really rude to her. She asked if he had a problem with her legs. He said no. You do. Either that or you're just lazy. At this point I have no idea what I'm reading, but I just can't stop LMAO. Dated a guy with a colostomy bag. The sex was pretty normal for the most part, besides the odd bag flapping against the leg once in a while. If the rhythm and momentum sped up enough, it could give me a good spank if we were doing it from behind.